Okay, so good morning. We continue on in Maseches Gittin today. Today's daf is Daf Yud Zayin 17. We are near the bottom of Daf Tet Zayin. We're going to have Rashi. We're going to have some stories. We're going to talk a little bit about the exile. So we got some really good stuff. With some Rashi, some Rashi. We're going to have some Rashi, absolutely. So let's take a look and see what we got. So we're going to share, absolutely. We're going to have a Tosfos, I think. So we should have lots of good stuff. So let's get going. So yesterday, no ice that I think of. So yesterday we noted two possible alternatives to a statement by Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, okay, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, regarding the case of a get. So we had a case of a get where we had Solomon? What? Solomon? Any Solomons? We'll see. Well, I'm not sure. We might, but okay. So let's take a look. So where one person said, we had one of the people who is now in front of the court saying that the get was written in front of me, and we have a second person saying the get was signed in front of me. Okay, and we had in our Mishnah, we said that that is not a good get. Now, is that only, and so we had two different statements by Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. We weren't sure, two different alternative statements. He only said one of them, but we're not sure which. So the first possibility is that it's only invalid if one of those people was the messenger. So if one of them was the messenger and the other one was just a stam person, a regular guy who just happened to be traveling along and is able to testify to either the writing or the signing. So that's the situation where it's not a good get. But if both of them were the messengers, if both of them were appointed by the husband to go and bring the get, then according to that statement of Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda in the name of Rav Yochanan, it would be a good get because we have two people appointed as agents. That's going to be sufficient for it to be a good get. And it highlights the fact that there's no need to testify about the writing and the signing when two people deliver it. Because again, if you don't testify about both the writing and the signing, we're going to say it's not good. But when you have two people who are serving as the agents, you don't even need to testify about the writing and the signing because you have two witnesses. And the whole purpose, is to understand that we need to make sure that there are witnesses. So that's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that even if the husband appointed both the witnesses as their as his messenger, we would still have a problem with the case of one saying it was written in front of me and one saying it was signed in front of me. And why would we have a problem? Because presumably, even when two people bring a get, you need both of them, or at least one of them, to be able to say that it was written and signed in front of me. And when you don't have that ability, to say that it was written and signed in front of me, for again, at least one of them, but ideally both of them, well, then you are not fulfilling the rabbinic mandate. And we're worried, presumably, about the lishma component, or we're worried about confusion with other kinds of confirmation cases. And so as a result, we're going to say it's not valid. Okay, so those are the two different approaches. And so the Gemara is now going to tell a story, and the story is going to tell us which approach we're going to follow. So let's take a look. We are on the last word on the seventh line from the bottom on 16b. So Rabba Bar Chana Chalash. Rabba Bar Chana was sick. He wasn't feeling well. Well, what happens when somebody's sick? So the people come to visit him to hope that he feels better. So Ulagabe, Rav Yehuda, Rabba L'Shayulebe. So they Rav Yehuda and Rabba went to ask him about how he was feeling, because they were concerned about him, right? That's what we do when we see that somebody's not well, right? So So Bohemine, but they also wanted to talk some Torah with him. So they asked him a question. If two people bring to Israel a get from overseas, do they have to both say that it was written and signed in front of them? Oh, Ein Shrichen, or do you not need to say that? So Amar Lahem, he said to them, Ein Shrichen, you don't need to say it. So that's like the first view of Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, which says that if you actually were to appoint both of the messengers, both of the witnesses as messenger, well, you've got two witnesses, you're in fine shape. You don't even need to have said anything. So of course, if one says it was written in front of me and the other says it was signed in front of me, it'll be fine because you don't need to actually have said anything. So ma ilu yomru b'fanenu gersha milo mehemne. After all, Rabbi Bar Chana explains, if the two witnesses didn't testify at all about the get, but just testified that this woman was divorced and that we would believe them. So as a result, we should similarly believe them with respect to their saying that they are bringing a valid get from overseas. And so therefore we are fine. So adahachi, while this was going on, asahahu chavra, this certain person came, and Rashi says chavra is a parsai, some Persian. But Tosos has a problem with that understanding because Tosos points out in the beginning of Tosos Mikame de Asu Chavre Lebavel that we have in other Gemaras, specifically in Kedushin and Yevamos, stories where it seems like the Chavra group was not the Persians. And so if we take a look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down in the narrow lines of Tosfos on the left-hand side of the page, at the end of the line, it says Va'omeri. You can see the abbreviation Reish Yud. That's how you could find it. So Va'omeri, Dechaverim Heim, Uma Achas, Sheba Bimei Rabbi Yochanan. That this was a nation that came to the Persian area when Rabbi Yochanan was living. The Kisheba LeBavel. And when they came to Bavel, Hirshia es hapersaim. You know how sometimes if you see somebody, you act in a different way. Well, these chavroim were the kind of people, apparently, that got the Persians so upset that the Persians became much more wicked towards the Jewish people. Shahayu bebavel v'iskalkalutfei ma'aromai. And we're going to see that they were even worse, that as a result of this, the coming of the Persians, they are going to treat the Jewish people even worse. So what did this guy do? What did this Persian or this Chavra guy do? He comes and takes the lamp away from Rabbi Bar Chana and his visitors. So while that was not nice, right? That was mean. So and well, why did he do that? So Rashi explains the reason. So sheyesh lepirsayim yom id, that the Persians have a holiday. She'ein madlikin or be'oto yom ela beit avodah zara shalahen, where they have a rule that says you can only light the candles in their churches that worship the idols, and you can't light their candles anywhere else. Not a very nice rule. But that's the reason that this person just came in and grabbed away the candle away from the Rabbi Bar Chana and his guests. So so what did he say? So what did Rabbi Bar Chana say? He said, Rachmana obtulach obtula devar esav. Look, we want to be in your shadow, God. We want you to protect us, or at least exile us to the place where Esav's children are. Don't let us stay here where Yishmael's children are. So, L'meimra da'aromai malumi parsai. Well, 1 second. That statement seems to suggest that the Romans are better than the Persians. 1 second. But Vahatani Rabbi Chia, but we have a statement of Rabbi Chia, my dixiv, with respect to a pasuk. What the following pasuk is in Eo. Elokim Hevin Darka Vuhu Yada Es Mekoma. That Hashem understands the way, its way, and Hashem knows its place. So what is that referring to? So the Reb Chia suggests that it's Yodei HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Yisrael. Hashem knows about the Jewish people. She'ein yichol l'kalam gzeirus aromayim amad v'hegla osam lebavel. That when it got so bad, when the Romans were ruling over them, and Hashem knew that we couldn't take any longer the Roman decrees, Hashem said, okay, we're going to send you now to Bavel because you'll be better off there. Well, if that suggests that we're better off in Bavel and under the Persians than under the Romans in Israel, so how could it be that now Rabba Bar Chana is saying that it's better off, that we're better off in the times of that with Esav than with the Persians? So lo kasha hamekamei denesu chavre leBavel. One is before the Chavrim came to Bavel. Again, either according to the Rashi, that's the Persians themselves, or according to Tosos, it's this other group that came later. Whereas the statement of Rabba Bar Chana is after the Persians came to Bavel, after this Chavra group came to Bavel, and again, either the Persians or the people that made the Persians worse, and that was why things were so bad that Rabba Bar Chana said, "I'd rather be under the shadow of Esav." Okay, so that was a quick aside, but that bottom line is that we see that Rabba Bar Chana ruled that that when you have two witnesses serving as messengers, you don't need to worry about b'fanei nechtav u'fanei nechtam. So now we're going to teach again two more stories that are going to lead to that exact same conclusion. And so if we see something in the first story that seems to disagree with it, don't worry, we're going to have a second story that will get us to the right place. So we said at the end of our Mishnah that if one person says it was written in front of me and two people say it was signed in front of me, then it would be kosher. And Tosos here says, if we take a look at Echad Omer b'fanei nechtam Shnei Ubeis Omrim b'fanei nechtam kasher, what does it say? L'Rava, according to Rava, afilu leika meyid al aksiva. Even if you don't have the one witness about the writing, kosher, it would still be kosher. V'lo nekad echad omer b'fanei nechtav ela agav reishav detani echad. That again, it's just why are we teaching a case about the one witness about the writing and two other witnesses about the signing? Because the previous case was two witnesses about the writing and one witness about the signing, and that was where we had the machlokas between the Tanna Kama, who said it was pasul, and Rabbi Yehuda, who said it was kasher. And so now we reverse the case, and remarkably, everybody says it's kasher. And the question is it kasher specifically because you need all three people, or is it kasher really because even just the last two is sufficient? And according to Rava, according to Tosas, actually it would be sufficient even to just have the two people about the signatures. And that makes sense because Rava was the one who says, what's our concern? And why do we need to say b'fanei nechtav u'fanei nechtam? The only concern we have is because we're worried that we won't have two witnesses. Well, guess what? If you send two messengers, you're going to have two witnesses. So as a result, that's why Rava would say that even if you don't testify at all about the writing, you will be fine. But okay, so now we're going to clarify the case. And again, the first clarification may sound different from what we just had Rabba Bar Chana say, but we will get to Rabba Bar Chana's conclusion. So Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Ami said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu elu shahaget yosem mitachas yad eid haksiva. That when is it true that it's a kosher get? It's only if the one who testifies about the writing is the messenger. So we need the one who testifies about the writing to be the messengers, because that way denasu kishnayim alzeh, because that single witness who testifies about the writing, if he's the messenger, we have the basic idea that the one messenger is effectively equal to 2 witnesses. So he has effectively testified about the validity of the writing and that it was written lishma. Ukeshanayim al zeh. And then we have 2 witnesses about the signing, because we actually have 2 witnesses about the signing. So that's why it's all kosher. But if the messengers were one of the witnesses on the signing, well then pasul, it's not a kosher get, because we don't have the messenger saying b'fanei nektam, and we don't have 2 witnesses sufficient on everything. So Alma, so according to this, kasavar shnayim sheheviu get umedinas hayam, if 2 people bring a get from overseas, they would need to say that it was written in front of us and it was signed in front of us, and that's why if they don't say that, so in other words, if one of the messengers is one of the 2 witnesses on the signature, and the other messenger is the witness on the writing, that's not going to be enough. They both need to say, both it was written in front of me and it was signed in front of me. So that's going to be a problem. So Amar le Rabbi Asi says, 1 second. Are you sure about that? He says to Rabbi Ami, Elameata, because if what you're saying is true, Reisha de Katani, when we had in the previous case, Shnaim Omrim b'fanenu nechtav, the Echad Omer b'fanei nechtav, that 2 people say it was written in front of me, and 1 person says it was signed in front of me, and we said it was pasul according to the Tanakh, Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was kosher. Get yotze mitachas yidei shneihem. Are you telling me that if both of the witness on the ksiva and the witness on one of the witnesses on the chasima on the signing would be both the agents and be the 2 messengers, possibly Rabbanan, the rabbis would still say it was pasul? And of course the answer is yes. Amr le'in. Yes, that's exactly what I would say. Now, again, this contradicts what we just said Rabbi Bar Chana would say. So we're now going to have a second story, same characters, different outcome. Let's take a look. A different time, Rabbi Asi was again meeting Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Ami was teaching that actually, if the get is produced by 2 witnesses to the signing, meaning that if the messengers are the 2 witnesses to the signing, so then kasher, it is a valid get. Even though we have 2 witnesses on the signing and 1 on the writing. And even though the messenger was not the one on the writing, because the earlier statement said it needed to be the messenger on the writing. But now he's saying it could be even the 2 witnesses on the signature. So Alma Kasavar, what does this show? Shnaim Sheviu get Medina Sayam. It seems that if 2 people bring the get from overseas, you don't need them to say both that it was written in front of them and that it was signed in front of them. So Amrle Rabbi Asi said back to Rabbi Ami, well, 1 second, Elamiata, Reisha de Gatani, what about the previous case in our Mishnah, where we had again Shnaim Omrim b'fanenu nechtav, 2 say that it was signed in front of them, 2 say that it was written in front of them, and 1 says that it was signed in front of him. Pasul, we said it was pasul for Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was kosher. So based on what you're saying, Taima de'ein haget yotze mitachas yidei shneim. It's because they did not have 2 witnesses. But haget yotze mitachas yidei shneim. But if in fact there had been 2 witnesses, machsherei rabbanim, you're saying now the rabbis would have said it was kosher. And Amar le ein. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Well, 1 second. Rabbi Asi says back to Rabbi Ami, "V'hazimnin lo amrat la hachi." 1 second, but you some other time when we were learning together, you didn't say this. The last time we were learning together, you said something different. You said that even when there are 2 witnesses, they both need to say b'fanei nechtam, and therefore, if the one messenger is not the one who says b'fanei nechtam, but is one of the ones who says b'fanei nechtam, it would be a non-kosher. In the last case, it would be a non-kosher get. So how could you change your opinion? What's the story? So Amar le, Rabbi Ami said back to him, Yosed he shalot timot. It's a peg that is not going to be moved. Well, what does that mean? So Rashi helps us out. Lashon acharon ze emes. The last thing that I'm telling you, that's the truth. Don't worry about the first situation. And that's in fact our conclusion. And so what have we concluded? We have concluded that in fact, it is the case that if two messengers come from overseas to Eretz Yisrael, they do not need to say b'fanei nechtav u'b'fanei nechtam. They do not need to say it was written in front of us, it was signed in front of us. It is okay for them to just testify that it is a valid get. And again, that is consistent with Rabba Bar Chana as well. It's consistent with all the stories that we've had, and it's consistent with at least one of each of the approaches that we've had. So we've got the final outcome, and we are in excellent shape and ready to continue with the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah introduces the date on the get. And of course, we're not talking about the date that you eat. We're not talking about the date that you go out with, but we're talking about the date that you put on a contract, namely, what day is it? So what happens? So let's take a look. If you write the get during the day, I'm sorry, what?
Okay.
Well, let's say it's today. Okay, well, let's take a look.
It's Friday.
I know, we're going to say it's Friday. Nichta bayom, if you write it on Friday, during the daytime when it's daylight outside, v'nechtam bayom, and you sign it when it's daylight outside on that same Friday. Exactly. So then it's going to be kosher. Let's take a look at the next case. Balayla v'nechtam balayla, or you write it at night and you sign it at night. So then, or balayla v'nechtam bayom, or you write it at night and you sign it the next day. Because how do we have a day in Jewish law? In Jewish law, right? When does Shabbat begin, Mark? When is
tonight?
Tonight, exactly. Shabbat begins tonight because in Jewish law, the night is the beginning of the day. And so as a result, if you were to write the get at night and then sign it the next morning, it is all the same day. And so as a result, that is also okay. So in all three of those cases, kasher, the get is going to be valid. However, bayom v'nechtam balayla, if you sign it on the day, and then, so if you were to sign it on, if you were to write it on Thursday, I know tonight at 7 o'clock is when we're going to begin showers. If we were to write it on Thursday during the day, and then we were to sign it on Thursday at night, well, that would not be good because Thursday at night, according to Jewish law, is Friday. It's Yom Shishi. And so as a result, you will have done it on two different days. I'm teaching you about it right now. Every day of the week in Judaism has a number associated with it. Sunday is day number 1. Monday is day number 2. Tuesday is day number 3. Wednesday is day number 4. Thursday is day number 5. Friday is day number 6. And how do we say 6 in Hebrew? Shishi. So Yom Shishi, that's Friday. Yes, we say Shabbat. Shabbat is Friday. Is Saturday. Okay. So the point is that if in fact you were to write it during the day and sign it at night, well then it's pasul. However, Rabbi Shimon says that it's kosher because Shahaya Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon used to say Kol HaGittin. Now, although usually the word get means a divorce contract, in this context, Gittin means not that. And indeed, Rashi tells us, Gittin shel mechar umatana v'halva. We're talking about a document that is commemorating a sale, a gift, or memorializing a sale, a gift, or a loan. And so in that situation, that shenichtavu bayom v'nechtamu balayla psulin, that's going to be not kosher. And why is it going to be not kosher? Rashi explains to us that it's going to be not kosher because the asila mitraf lekuchos miyoma diksiva v'shalo kedin. If I sell you a piece of property on Tuesday, and then I borrow money from Mark on Wednesday. Okay. Now, if then Mark does not have any claim to the property that you bought from me, because you bought the property from me before I borrowed the money from Mark. But if you bought the property from me on Tuesday and Mark lent me the money on Monday, well then, and the money was loaned with a document, well then you are responsible for knowing that I borrowed the money, and because it's got a document, so as a result, people are assumed to know, and that property is mortgaged to Mark. And now, even though I sold it to you, if I can't pay Mark, he can come to you and claim the property. Now, you'll still have a claim against me, but presumably the reason that he went to you is because he wasn't able to get the money from me. So as a result, you may be up a creek without a paddle. And so as a result, we can see how having the wrong day on the document can make a very big difference. Because if you actually bought the property from me on Wednesday, but we have a Tuesday date on the contract, and we have a Tuesday morning date on the contract. Well, let's do Monday on the contract. We have Monday on the contract, but you actually bought it from me on Wednesday, and Mark actually lent me the money on Tuesday, even though he's supposed to be able to claim the property from you, but you will have a contract that says Monday on it. And so as a result, you'll show Mark the contract that says Monday, and he'll say, oh, I guess I can't claim the property from you. But he thought that he was going to be able to claim that property. And so as a result, you'll effectively have tricked him out of being able to take that property. And so that's the concern that we've got. That's the concern that we have. And so as a result, in that situation, Rabbi Shimon is concerned. However, chutz megittin nashim, but when it comes to a get, when it comes to a divorce document, there is no right of claim associated with it. As Rashi puts it, the lav legovinu avida. It's not enabled. The document is not made in order to allow the woman to collect something. And we're going to explain it further in the Gemara. And the Tosfos is going to really help us on this particular point. So let's take a look. Itmar. Now we're going to try to understand why did the rabbi suddenly insist that they put the date on the document? So we're going to have two explanations. Why did they put a date on the get? So let's take a look. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishum Bas Achoso, that we were worried about the sister's daughter. And Rashi explains, what's the story? We're talking about where someone married their niece, and now the niece went and had an affair. Now, if somebody in Jewish law, a woman has an affair, or a man has an affair with a married Jewish woman, well, the punishment is death. And so, yeah, that's big. And so as a result, what might the husband do? Because after all, he married his niece. So he actually, even though she, was unfaithful to him, he may still not want her to die. And so as a result, he'll write a get without a date on it. And really, she is supposed to die. But now she'll show the get, say she was divorced, and now instead of being actually somebody who's liable to death, she'll be just subject to, she won't be subject to really anything. And so as a result, he'll save her. And Rish Lakish says, no, that's not the reason that we decided to write the date on the get, but Mishum Peiros. We're worried about the fruit from the wife's property, the Malog property. Why? What's the concern about that? So with Malog property, that's property that a wife brings into her marriage, where the underlying property continues to belong to her, and it can go up in value or down in value. But the husband has the right to the fruit of that property during the course of their marriage. The proceeds, exactly. Now, he is only entitled to those proceeds until they get divorced. Now, we will see three different opinions about when, during the divorce process, he's no longer entitled to the Malog property. But according to Reish Lakish's explanation, the writing of the date on the get must be some aspect of the trigger to when he's no longer entitled to the property. And so as a result, that's why we decided to put the date on, because this way the wife knows if the husband takes the fruit, he's stealing from her. So Reish Lakish, my time alo amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we want to understand, why doesn't Reish Lakish say like Rabbi Yochanan, and why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say like Reish Lakish? So Reish Lakish doesn't say like Rabbi Yochanan. So Amar Lach, he'd explain, why don't I say like Rabbi Yochanan? Because znus, having immoral relations, is not something that's that common. Now, Tosfos here points out, what? It's not that common. We've got tons of places elsewhere where it seems like it actually is common. So what Tosfos says is, no, it doesn't mean that it's not common. You have to take a look at the beginning of the Tosfos at the top of Yud Zayin Amud Bet. Perish znus be'edim ubahasra lo shchiach. That what's uncommon is when you actually have immoral relations, and there are two witnesses who actually watch it happen and warn her beforehand, right? That's what's uncommon. And so that's Tosfos' explanation. So in any event, so that's why Reish Lakish doesn't agree with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, my time alo amar Reish Lakish. Why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan agree with Reish Lakish? Well, kasavar yesh lebal peros ad shas nasina, because he doesn't say that the writing of the get is when the husband loses the right to his wife's property. It's only when the husband gives the get to his wife, when she actually becomes divorced. So now we're going to further clarify this, their respective understandings of our Mishnah. So Bishlam al Reish Lakish, it makes sense according to Reish Lakish, Mishum Haki Kamaksha Rabbi Shimon, that why is it that Rabbi Shimon says that an early dated get is going to be kosher? Because it's because you can't use it to collect, and worse comes to worse, he is giving up. The husband is giving up his rights to the wife's property early, so he can do that. That's fine, okay. Elul Rabbi Yochanan, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, my time at the Rabbi Shimon de Machshir. Why is it that Rabbi Shimon allows a get that's early dated? After all, if we're concerned about the daughter, the niece, right, the daughter of the sister who one is allowed to marry, the daughter of the sister, we're concerned that she's going to have an affair, and he's going to write a divorce decree that allows her to not be punished with the death penalty. Well, that same concern should suggest that Rabbi Shimon should not allow this early dated get. So Amar Lach Rabbi Yochanan would respond to you, no, Aliba de Rabbi Shimon lo kamina. I'm not explaining the reason that Rabbi Shimon would say that the rabbis enacted the get. I'm explaining ki kamina aliba de Rabbanan. I'm explaining why the rabbis enacted this rule of having the date on the get. Yes, according to Rabbi Shimon, you would need to use Reish Lakish's explanation.
You would think though that the Bet Din would know right away if someone is releasing it early, writing a date earlier or not.
Well, it doesn't have to be written in front of a Beis Din. It doesn't. The writing doesn't have to happen in front of a Beis Din. Now we do I believe we do all of it essentially in front of the Beis Din. But that is correct. We don't need the writing in front of the Beis Din. So Amar Lach Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan would say, right. So okay. So we said that. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan. So now it makes sense. So now of course, we understand exactly, according to Rabbi Yochanan, what Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis are arguing about. They're arguing about what's the reason for the takana. According to the rabbis, the takana is for the niece, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, and according to Rabbi Shimon, the takana is about the nichsei malog. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, Hainu deika ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. And we now understand exactly why Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis disagree. But Elul Reish Lakish, my Ika ben Rabbi Shimon l'Rabbanan. What are they arguing about? So the answer is, Reish Lakish would explain, Pere de Mishas Ksiva va'ad Shas Chasima Ika benayu. That what they're arguing about is, do we care about the time between the signing and the writing and the signing? Meaning, according to, so let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi has a good explanation here. It's 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Dil Rabbanan, according to the rabbis, lo by lemitra, we're not worried about any kind of trickery. Ela mechasima ve'elech, only from the signing and forward. So as a result, hilkach mukdam pasal. Therefore, if you don't have the signing and the writing on the same day, it's going to be pasal. Because if we only write the day of the writing, well, then we're going to have a problem, because then it's going to be a different day, and we're going to think that she's not going to be entitled to her property. She's going to be entitled to her property at a different point in time. And so as a result, that's why we're concerned. Meaning, according to Reish Lakish, the rabbis maintain that the husband's going to benefit from the Malog property until the get is signed. So if the get is written by day and not signed until the following night, the woman's going to may try to get the produce that was sold on the day that the get was written, right, before it was signed. And so as a result, that's not permitted, and the court will support her because of the date that's on it. And so as a result, to avoid that possibility, we don't want to have that happen. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, all that matters is the date on the writing itself. That's what matters. And so as a result, given that the date that the get was written, it was what matters, according to Rabbi Shimon, we are fine. Well, 1 second. Wait. We have another statement that seems to say the exact opposite between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. That we said earlier that Rabbi Yochanan says a husband enjoys the fruits of Malog until the giving of a get. But we have a statement now, the Itmar, when do we take possession of fruits back from the husband? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishas Ksiva. Rabbi Yochanan says it's from the time of the writing. Reish Lakish Amar Mishas Nesina. Reish Lakish says no, it's from the time of the giving. And so that's exactly opposite of what we said. So the Gemara answers Epoch. You got to reverse that alternative statement, and it's Reish Lakish who says that we focus on the time of the writing, and it's Rabbi Yochanan who says that we focus on the time of the giving. So, all right. So, Amar le Abaye le Rabbi Yosef. So now we're going to have an indirect set of questions on this topic. Okay. So the Gemara is going to note, well, one of the 3 situations where a get is invalid, but if the woman remarried, her children would still be legitimate, is a case where the get is missing the time. And so, which now is going to raise the question. So, Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef Gimel Gittin Psulin. We have 3 different situations where the get itself is puzzle, the imnisas havlad kosher. But if in fact they get the woman remarries, she's going to get the child is going to still be a kosher child, and we're not going to say that it's a mamzer. So, and one of those is the case of where there's no date on the get. So, maho ilu chachamim b'takanasam. What help did the rabbis do by making their takana? In the end, it doesn't make a difference if there's a get on the document. So, ahanu de lechatchila lo tzina. No, what the benefit is that lechatchila we won't let her get married. If, of course, she already got married, then there's nothing for us to do about it. But if, in fact, she didn't get married, then okay. And well, and now Abaye follows up. Gazye lizman didei b'yave nahala. Well, what happens if the husband cuts out the date on the get, right? And then he gives it to the wife. Is that going to be a good get, or is it not going to be a good get? So Amrle l'ramai lo chayshinan. We're not going to be concerned about it, because why would he do that, right? He would do that because, according to Reish Lakish, what matters is the time of the writing. So let's say he wrote the get on Tuesday, but he didn't give the get until Friday. Well, the husband wants to benefit from the fruit on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But if in fact she has the contract that says the get that says that it was written on Tuesday, she gets all the fruit starting on Tuesday. And so as a result, he may have an incentive to trick things by cutting out the get. And so that way, the only date that will be relevant will be cutting out the date of the get. And as a result, the only date that will be relevant potentially is the date that is given. So, and Rav Yosef explained, we're not worried about trickers like that. Okay, so Kasav Bo Shavua, what? So Abaye again is continuing to press Rav Yosef about what happens if it doesn't actually have a date. What happens if instead of writing the date, you wrote the Jewish calendar is broken up into 7-year cycles. So what happens if you wrote which 7-year cycle we were in? We were in the 5th cycle, and these 7-year cycles are grouped in groups of 7, and then after 7-year cycles, we have what's known as the Yovel year. And so what happens if we don't actually write the specific day? We don't write that it was written on Friday, June 2nd. We rather write that it was written in the 3rd of the 7 cycles of the Shemitah cycle. So what happens if that was what was written? Or Shana, or they wrote it was just written in the year. It was written in 5783, right? That's the year. So what if we did that? Or Chodesh, what if we didn't say it was written on the I think it's the 13th day, 13th day of Sivan. We wrote that it was written in Sivan, or Shabbat, or we don't write that it was written on the 13th day of Sivan, but we write it was written during the week of the 7th of Sivan.
Remember something 7 years later.
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's part of what his question is. Are we going to remember when it was? So what's the halacha? Is this going to be a good get or not? Now, of course, again, remember that when there's no date whatsoever, it's still going to be valid b'diavad. So Amrle kasher, Rav Yosef would say it is kosher. It is totally okay. When we have this requirement to put a date on it, it does not have to be the specific day of the month and the week. Rather, now one second. Well, if that is the case, if even having the 7-year cycle is sufficient, what in the world did the rabbis accomplish? Well, ahanu l'shavua dekameh. It works because even though it's not great that you have a general date that's so general, but if in fact the niece had the affair before that 7-year cycle, we'll know that she gets punished. Ula shavua de basrei. And when it comes to the Malog property, we know that at the end of that 7-year cycle, if we only know which 7-year cycle it is, we know that everything the wife will get after the fruit after the 7-year cycle. So the point is that at least on some level, it works. De'ilo temahachi, because if you don't say this, if in fact we instead say that, look, you need to be specific, and it's only with the specificity that the get will work, we're going to have a big problem, because Yom Gufei, even if I write today, Friday, on the get, that is not going to be specific enough. Do we know whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon? We only know that that before this date, any affair would be problematic, and after this date, any fruit of Malog property the wife would get. We don't know about things that actually would happen on this day. And so the same thing is true if you mention which 7-year cycle we're in, or if we mention which year we're in, or if we mention which month we're in, or if we mention which week we're in. It's the same thing. All that we're telling us in the end is it's either before this 7-year cycle or after this 7-year cycle, but at least we have a frame of reference. And so that is where we'll conclude for today. And if you're wondering, well, what about a case where a husband writes a get and holds on to it for a few days, and now we've got this confusion about the date that's on the get and the date when actually they get divorced. And to see why we're not worried about that situation, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. And so we'll pick up, I believe, about an hour before Mincha, and look forward to continuing our learning.
You know what happened
to-
when he drove by? He fell.
I know. I think he's going to be okay. He tripped over something. He didn't really fall. All right. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to close here. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.